Howdy, Cape Codders. Welcome to another episode of the Scannell Agenda. Today's date is Friday, June 5th, 2015. And this is show number 23. And I'd like to say thank you to the Cape Cod Community Media Center here. And I'm very excited about the Cape Span program as well that's coming up. I just did a short promo with the mascot here, Mr. Dog. And I'm reading here now about the tautog and the coastal angler. And this is May 2015. So I was just glancing through here. It's got a nice picture of a tautog there. And this is on page 4. Now is the time to get ready for big tautog. It's a fish I'm familiar with as a boy mostly, and then, you'd get some in the pots. But we discussed many years ago bringing back the tautog, and now they come back pretty well, I guess. And now the charter fishing for tautog, so that's great. But I think back in the 90s, these fish, along with a lot of other coastal inshore fish, were wiped out. This does relate to the inshore windmills. I'm going to make that connection in a minute. But the people down at Milford Lab, National Marine Fisheries Service labs in Milford, had to really strain to go out and get the broodstock to raise up and spawn, in aquaculture labs, the tautog. That's how bad things were. They had a real heck of a time just finding enough broodstock. So with the windmills properly done, if we wanted them on Nantucket Sound, okay, I'll get to that. But windmills should be really good reef systems, and not just a windmill is a windmill. No, a windmill has to be part of the fisheries system, because why waste a perfectly good opportunity to build a first-class artificial reef, which pays dividends, of course. It costs money, but then again it pays dividends too in the fisheries income. So thank you for that nice article in Coastal Angler. And now, before I get to the Cape Wind thing, I was looking at this. This here is a power gen natural gas brochure. And it's about the big boys who really do produce the electricity. None of this, few little windmills. These guys are the guys that get it done. So you can see their picture of their plant, and these are major generating stations. And I'd always thought, as soon as I get into this stuff seriously, I said, you can't just ask these big guys to just shut down when the wind blows. But that's basically the thinking now, is that the electricity coming from the windmills will be a little bit here and there, not too much. And I took exception to that too, and I said, no, I'm designing these major systems here. We can't have these little toys represent wind power. So Cape Wind, here's a book, and that is written by Wendy Williams and Robert Whitcomb. And when was this now? I remember getting it signed. To the inventor of Love Power Grid Consortium. I think I had her say that. And this is 2007. So this issue is still ongoing. You know, I call it the Jim's Wind Farm issue. I don't even call it the Cape Wind issue. Now, the basic problem with this whole issue has been, over the years, we never had a deal to look at. It wasn't as if someone was coming to a town meeting with an article, as I've done and many of you folks here on the Cape have done. And so they expect you to have your homework done and you put the deal on the table and then it comes up to a vote at the town meeting and then, you know, that becomes the town policy and you move ahead. Well, this is kind of strange government here, the way this issue went over the years, just dragging out. And it seemed to me that a lot of people frame the issue to be, you know, do you like wind energy? Do you like wind energy? And to me, that was exasperating. And the other thing was, it was always a yes or no on the Cape Wind proposal on Horseshoe Shoal. Yes or no? Do you like it? Yes or no? And that to me was just flabbergasted me every time, I'll tell you. Because these issues are pretty complex, and it's not yes or no about Jim's Wind Farm. See, we have a future to design with our energy systems. It's a new future, and this whole Jim's Wind Farm thing, Cape Wind, to me has been a very destructive red herring for the whole wind energy issue. Now, my work here depends on these windmills that I design offshore, working with the real industrial players in the power industry, gas industry, oil, all that. But these proposals for Cape Wind, I think, were a bit of a problem for the real electric generators. And my systems that I design are totally different in this way. See, the Georges Bank mega mills or my other wind systems like the Nauset mills, what they do primarily is produce hydrogen by producing electricity, and then you crack the water into oxygen and hydrogen. And then we produce compressed air, and then we also, since we're producing hydrogen, well, we've got oxygen left over, so then therefore we mix some oxygen with some compressed air, and there may be different grades. And then you've got something I call ORCA, oxygen-rich compressed air. Now this all makes a lot of sense long term. These efficiencies of producing the hydrogen and compressed air will go up, up, up as time goes on. We don't have these efficiencies right now, but I can guarantee you that this technology is not so far out of line that we can't really start getting a jump on this hydrogen technology. And you know, every once in a while you read about how hydrogen is being produced easier, better, cheaper, and they talk about, for many years now, the hydrogen economy, and I believe in it. I think it makes a lot of sense in the long term. So the Cape Wind red herring issue was really exasperating for me, but I had to keep going on what I call the Georges Bank mega mill. I used to wear a little feather in my ponytail, and that was because I'm kind of a funny character sometimes. I wanted to shame myself into designing the perfect windmill blade. Now the feather, I don't have one, but the feather is like the perfect windmill blade in miniature. So over the years I've worked probably a few hundred drawings of different methods, probably more, of just the blades of a windmill designed and engineered like the feather. I call them a feather blade. So these are detailed drawings. It's not like I'm in a battle between yes or no on Jim's Wind Farm. It was very exasperating. So I've described the Georges Bank mega mill system, but it's very important to note that with these systems of my design, I'm not designing strictly for somebody's wind farm. These are multiple economy type designs. In other words, you get your fisheries economy with the windmills I designed for offshore, which may not be viable. It may be more viable to go with a prairie windmill. But getting back to the offshore stuff, the stuff I design has artificial reefs built in, and that's very important. So we have to be able to plug the wind energy into our existing infrastructure. Now these people here that I held this up earlier here, you see these people, and they're really in the business of producing the electricity. Now if we were to say to them, okay, we got a pilot project designed for a small energy plant, and it's going to be a gas plant, and but it's going to have this input of highly charged compressed air, like a supercharger, into your gas plant. And these guys would say, well, where are you going to get that? How much is it going to cost? And we'd answer those questions, and then we would design a small plant to use compressed air or oxygen-rich compressed air, and you'd use the gas turbine, gas-fired turbines. So it's quite an industry that I'm not all that familiar with. Just, you know, it's fascinating. But everyone knows that with an internal combustion engine, if you add a turbocharger, you'll get a lot more power. Well, we can do that with the energy plants, including nuclear plants too. Anything that you supercharge with compressed air from the wind, from offshore or from the prairies, you're going to get greatly increased horsepower from the steam. These are all steam plants, of course. So the Cape Wind thing has been very exasperating for me. Now, here's a couple things about what I believe. First of all, I believe in Nantucket Sound as state territory. Many years ago, when the coastal zone management was coming into reality and the state was planning, I think there were some proposals and plans to give over Nantucket Sound completely to Massachusetts. And that would have made a lot more sense, because it really is inshore. It's an inshore area. So if you draw a line basically from Monomoy Point to Great Point on Nantucket, you know, you've got all that's inshore. And to call it offshore, an offshore windmill, I think it just drives me nuts. It really does. It's not an offshore territory. So Horseshoe Shoal area is a nice little Nantucket Sound area. And I believe down the road that this would be the one area, or maybe there's more than one area, of course, but this would really be the real good area to do a proving ground area for the real offshore windmills. So I've got files on models for the big systems that we put offshore. So it would be wise to model it up on the computer. If you've got a wind energy design that encompasses, like the Georges Bank Mega Mill, it encompasses your base and your stick, and then your base is here, and then your stick, and then you've got extensive stays, and that's your standing rigging, and then you've got extensive stays up here, and that's your running rigging. I've explained that in previous shows. And then down here under the waterline, you've got stands for the cabling and stands for the wave generator equipment, all tied in. And then, of course, you've got the artificial reefs built in as part of the structural integrity of the windmill into the stay systems. So you've got multiple incomes, wind, wave, fisheries in one mill. And of course these mills, I call them a forest of windmills, not a wind farm, because they're so tied together with the stay systems. And I think they're pretty efficient, but you can't say that for sure until it gets modeled up. So I'm kind of frustrated here in that, nobody's interested enough in my stuff to have a look at it and model it up and see if it's a half-baked idea or something worthy. I know it's worthy to model up, I know that much. But we got sidetracked on this Cape Wind thing. And I think Cape Cod has more brains than that, but we didn't really prove it by this Cape Wind issue, yes or no, Jim's wind farm. See, that really ruined the whole issue, yes or no, on Jim's wind farm. We have to look at the long-term infrastructure of wind energy, wave energy, fisheries, and we have to plug that in to the existing infrastructures, and the new stuff has to be kind of a common denominator between the old stuff and the new stuff. So yeah, your fisheries component, it was never talked about too much, other than there were people that were complaining about how the windmills would be bad for the fisheries. Nothing could be further from the truth. Unless you don't have brains and you don't have eyes and you don't have a radar and you run into a windmill, that could ruin your day. Okay. But other than that, these things are artificial reefs and they're very, very valuable to fisheries. So you would think fishermen would say, hey, an artificial reef is a good thing. And you put a windmill in, and that's where your artificial reef is. And so therefore that is good for the fisheries. Personally, I like ranges. I don't think we'd need all these ranges that windmills would provide, but it's nice to get line a couple things up and you know where you are. That's just inshore fishing, for scallops. Most fishermen like to get a range and a bearing based on a range this way and a range that way, and most of that's kept in your head. Anyway, we got really thrown off the track with this Cape Wind thing. It's been a bad experience. It hasn't brought us forward. Now, the Love Power Grid Consortium is a legal, political, and economic design for the future of wind energy. It's not Steve's wind farm. Yes or no on Steve's wind farm? No, it's nothing like that. This is infrastructure work, I think, at its finest. No one's come up with anything better than I can see for the new green grid that we need for this world. Now, the Love Power Grid Consortium gets its name because I'm in the social services. I designed a 2% energy tax to be built in. That's where love comes from. And of course, power grid, we all know what a power grid is. Okay, but that's electrical. But think of the new power grid, the green energy grid, as non-electrical power. Non-electrical power, really? Wow, that's heavy, huh? Well, hydrogen. That's like your frozen electricity. Your compressed air. Your compressed air can run your refrigerator and your air conditioner, because, and a little bit of electricity thrown in there too, but your main compressors for refrigeration don't have to be electrically driven. They can be wind driven, compressed air driven. Why not, That would lessen the need for these major electrical grids. Right there, that's a huge load off of the electrical demands that are provided for by all these big electrical companies. So if you have compressed air on tap everywhere with the TRIPE system, track pipe system, monorails and wide gauge rails that carry the green fuels of the future, hydrogen, compressed air, and ORCA, oxygen-rich compressed air. So if you have that on tap, then you have the ability to run your refrigeration and your air conditioning with that fuel. Fuel? Well, compressed air, think of it as a fuel. It's a power source. Pneumatics. Pneumatics is what it is. So anyway, I wanted to hold this project hostage to what I call the consortium model. With a consortium, you've got private enterprise, businesses, fishermen, fisheries interests, state, federal, local fisheries interests. You've got private investors, and then the public. These would be the players with the consortium, the Love Power Grid Consortium. Now, as I have it planned for the Love Power Grid Consortium, would start small and model things up and demonstrate that it is feasible and doable, first of all, of course. Demonstrate that it can be done legitimately, financially. You know, it would probably need some support, but maybe not as much as we might think, because the Nauset mills that we'd start out with would really be providing quite a bit for us. So the consortium model is something I believe in, because I could take $1 million or $2 million if I had it, and then invest in a windmill or two, and then what I would own as the investor would be basically, the base would be the consortium owned part, and then the stick and the running rigging and the windmills, etc. That would probably be the investor owned component, the lighter weight stuff. Now, so you'd come along and you'd invest and you'd put in your hardware, and then you generate electricity to make hydrogen on the spot. You'd have a byproduct of oxygen. That would be your ORCA, oxygen-rich compressed air. And then you'd be pumping probably low-pressure compressed air to different stations that would compress it more. And these would be the air conveyors that I've spoken about, which drag air down to depth. And that's very efficient for production of compressed air, as opposed to piston-driven systems, which we're all familiar with. And a lot cheaper. The air conveyors are like a conveyor belt that drag air under the water, and the water depth compresses the air. So that can be complex, but it's really not that complex to design. So the consortium is the first thing we want to think about when we're talking about the future. Because the green energy future is only hurt by these kinds of issues here. And this was a pretty good book, by the way. I went through it and I outlined it and underlined it. What's this? I just came to this. Yeah. Anyway, they're talking about diving and the nets causing damage. That's on page 75. Talking about easements. So this thing is a lot of politics, and they talk about the battle between Matthew Patrick and the Cape Cod Times. Cape Cod Times often gets in there and gets it wrong. They really do. So I don't blame the Cape Cod Times for Cape Codders being stupid about this whole wind issue, but if you read just the Cape Cod Times and you took it from there, you wouldn't have a leg to stand on as far as being within the realm of common sense, because the Cape Cod Times really had an agenda the whole way through, and they were not interested in common sense. They had their deal going, and you know, this whole wind energy future, you know, you got to look at that. It just can't be Jim's deal, which is what it was. And when you frame questions as to be just Jim's deal, Jim's wind farm, wow, that's amazing that we did that for many, many years. I don't know how town meeting people suffered with that. And so it just boggles my mind. It really does, that we, as town meeting people on Cape Cod, allowed the issue to just be framed the way it was framed. We got to really get some homework done in a hurry, because the energy systems have to be redesigned. So the Cape Wind battle, which is still going on, really has done nothing for us. Thanks for watching the Scannell Agenda. Thank you very much, Cape Codders.